Welcome everyone to Challenger's Effortless Experience Insights series. I'm your host, Scott Rothman, a market director with the Effortless Experience. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Dave Reedy, Senior Director of Performance Enablement at PayPal and member of the Global Customer Support Leadership Team. Dave, thanks so much for joining me today.
Wonderful to be here, Scott.
Today, Dave and I are talking about engaging a dispersed workforce. Now, Dave, I think everyone knows PayPal. But I think you are uniquely qualified to talk on the subject, given your role and the footprint of PayPal. Would you mind just kicking us off by taking a minute or so to share a bit more about your role and also give us a sense of just how dispersed your team is?
Sure, Scott. So I have been with PayPal a little longer than six years and a couple of months. And that's followed a 25-year banking career. And interestingly, as I was looking for another opportunity outside of banking, the opportunity that really caught my eye right off the bat was coming to work for PayPal for a number of different reasons. I was able to actually convince my wife and our youngest son of 4 kids to move from Charlotte, North Carolina, all the way over to Manila in the Philippines. And we spent 4.5 years there. I was managing the outsourced locations for our North America and AU, Australia customers. And at one point, decided that, that I wanted to stay with the company and that we would return back to the States where I'm now living out of Delaware, but managing a performance enablement group. In addition, I still have my fingers in touch with what's happening in the outsourced world. And I'm managing a team of folks in all countries in our footprint. So I have people in Manila, in Bangalore, in EMEA, in Dublin and Dundalk, in Ireland. I have folks in Brazil and as well in North America. And part of what I do is not just the outsource piece, but I also manage a group of about 15 site coaches, which are dispersed geographically across the globe. I have a whopping team of 2 quality team members who manage quality for our global customer service. And then I also manage some production groups, one called ICA, which is Internal Consultancy and Advocacy, and a social customer care unit. And oddly as well, I have 2 other units that I manage. One is a BPA group, which is Business Performance Analyst group of about 9 people that are spread between Omaha and Chandler. And then finally, as part of that performance enablement title, I have charge of the global customer service resources that help us to manage performance and enable performance better through our tools and our metrics, as well as our incentive plans. So got quite an interesting scope. And in any one given meeting or minute, I could be dealing with a frustrated customer or a happy customer, as well as anything related to performance, analytics, et cetera.
Interesting scope, interesting footprint, which again, given PayPal's size and footprint, probably not a huge surprise, but nonetheless, a number of staff onshore, offshore, badged, not badged. And by the way, just to clarify, because I feel like you and I will probably do this a couple of times throughout, but for everyone listening, where many of us use the term, say, reps or agents, Dave, I don't want to step on your toes. So if you want to kind of just a quick rundown of some of the naming conventions that you guys use at PayPal, for instance, teammates, team leads, and so on. Actually, maybe that does it right there, right?
No, that does it right there. Yeah, right there. Well, I mean, I think it deserves a little bit of more in-depth answer on that one, and particularly as it relates to teammates. So we're a very employee-centric organization. We obviously have an interest in making sure that our teammates have the right tools, the right technology, the right training, the right support, the right engagement activities going on across each of our global sites. That's important to us. So in deference to that as well, we, instead of agents, representatives, et cetera, we call our front-facing and frankly everybody a teammate, just out of respect for what role that they play and the equality that we try to bring to the work world.
So let's talk about that population. And you and I have talked over the past, 9, 12 months about this. I've talked to a few of your colleagues about this. Again, we're talking about how to engage a dispersed workforce. We are 12 months into this, if you will. What's different today from a year ago?
So much. It's incredible. I think these stories are probably to the audience that will resonate because essentially I can remember on the 12th of, uh, of March last year, sitting in an airport in Tampa, Florida. I had gone down there with one of my sons. We met down there to go see a baseball game, uh, spring training, and everything was canceled during the game. So we had to jump on a plane and he headed back to Charlotte and I headed back to Philadelphia and then come back to Delaware and began to think about what this was going to mean with the pandemic bearing down on us. What was it going to mean for our workforce? And then when you look across the globe, our challenges were like everybody else's. We were obviously having people, needing our service and increasing the need for our service as we had we had millions and millions of additional enrollees come onto our platform to move money around. We had, a challenge to keep people safe, to get people home, set them up technology wise to make sure that they could do what we needed them to do. And at the time, we were going through a transition to a new, a newer channel, async, and we had less than 10% of our volume, in pilots around the globe doing async, and we hadn't really planned to ramp it up to above 65% until 2023. But because of the pandemic, we made the strategic decision very quickly to up that as quickly as we could to really train everybody. And we had a 90-minute training that we had to get people exposed and understanding what async was, and and to send people home as many as possible. So and as quickly as possible. We did have some of our sites in the Philippines stay open because they were able to manipulate the way they could set up their locations with proper social distancing space. So we had the ability to actually keep some folks working in some of our sites, but then the rest of the world, including our in-house sites, we had to quickly get people home because we were starting to get cases that were impacting sites. And as you know, when that occurs, you really have to clean the site out. You've got to take a couple of days to get it all sanitized and moved on so people might be able to come back. But then the yeoman's effort that everybody went through to create, the pickup of the laptops or the monitors and the towers that we were sending home and all that, that was just amazing to try to get that done. So, as we got through that, there's a lot of different things that you sort of have to consider. And, what are we doing differently today? Well, we've been able to get through that acute phase and really enhance the technology so that we're able to go back to phones. We even have a program, an application that we're going to be testing over the next couple of months within most of our site locations that helps to cut out noise through noise reduction software. So we're implementing that. And, as we look to how, what the new norm would look like, we're pretty much sticking with the work and home routine at this point, although we are opening up some sites very slowly in a test way for volunteers to come in and say, hey, I'd like to come in and work at least a 2 or 3 day work schedule out of one of our existing facilities. So we're trying to adapt to that situation, but with safety in mind for sure. It's very, very limited at this point. Um, we have gone back to opening up our phones to customer contacts, and it's been, a good kind of return to norm. But as you then go back to, from an async channel to the phone channel with all of our customers, the choices that they have are obviously there for them to communicate with us the way they would like. But we've had a little bit of challenge with that because we don't know when they come back. Are they going to come back in mass? Are they going to Are they
Yeah.
going to stay in async? And, so we've had a couple of rough weeks of trying to figure it all out. We also had to realize that as we trained everybody to do async and got them fine-tuned through a program that we called Let's Ace It, gave them a series of do's and don'ts about how to work the async channel, what they should be doing and including in their messages versus not including in their messages. Once we got through that and built mastery in that space, our stats normalized, our handle times in focus message handle times came down, our quality scores began to go up. But now we're in that phase over the last couple of months where we're taking people who are used to doing messaging and going back to phones. So you have that adjustment period again. I haven't been on the phone for a long time. Now I'm getting used to having someone face to face versus somebody that once I'm done asking them a question or giving them an answer, I pause the conversation until they come
Yeah.
back to me and then work through it. So, it's just a whole different dynamic. And it's been interesting to help support leaders through this journey through a variety of different techniques.
I mean, clearly a decent amount of change over the last 12 months. To your point, the shift to work from home, right? It was a real shift for many of the organizations that we work with. To your point, a decent amount of change over the last few months as you've opened up the phones again. Also, from a leadership level, you all are fairly hands-on. I mean, you travel to sites and so on, which obviously that's been put on hold. So, given all these changes and all the change that's occurred, how are you keeping this workforce engaged, right? I mean, how do you keep them engaged? How do you keep them connected um, during all of this stuff, for lack of a better term?
Well, it's very critical, obviously, to keep people engaged, and how you do that is, really depends on what you have to share as well as the vehicles of which you've created to share particular information. So we've always been a high touch organization where we do a lot of focus groups and we do a lot of communication, and transparency is our middle initial, if we had one. And we try to be as transparent about what's going on as possible. So the corporation really did a fantastic job of keeping teammates up to speed on what was changing, what we wanted to do to help support them from a wellness and a safety and security perspective. So there was so much email. There's websites out there. There's chats from our CEO, and also fireside type chats with our CFO and head of GCO, John Rainey. There's been such an increase in the amount of communication that we're getting in settings like this, where we sit and have a chat with John, and there's an open dialogue, and you can ask questions and things of that nature. At the local levels, we have very, very well developed what we call site leader plan. And the site leader is someone who's chosen from the main operating groups within a particular site to really lead all of the engagement activities, including the community activities and things of that nature, to make sure everybody is in tune with what's going on. So there's quite an investment in time to put activities together, whether they be just pure communication activities through emails, but also through scheduled events. I have an employee engagement group as an example that's really taken hold, and there's all kinds of stuff going on to keep people engaged. Tonight we have later on at 10 p.m. my time, we have a kind of a funny situation where we're having a cook-off hosted by a kind of a person who's dressing up as one of the more famous cooks, coming in and having some fun with that. We have wellness activities that are virtually been put together, and in my group with ICA and SCC, there's about 150-ish people in that group, and the leaders challenged the teammates to see who could have the most amount of steps and drink the most ounces of water. So we report our steps and our numbers every day, and we're into about 1.2 million steps since the beginning of the month, and about 13,000 ounces of water consumed by the people who want to participate. So
Sure.
all leaders are participating. About a third of the teammates are participating, but that's an example of how we're keeping people engaged with all these different kind of activities. I was doing focus groups recently with teammates as well, and the story behind that one is a little bit sad in that when you know March of last year happened, I had been used to going previous to that month, going out to sites probably every 2 weeks, not only locally in North America, but globally. I would be visiting at least quarterly most of our sites to sit down with people and hear what's going on, and kind of get a little uh, I call them the hugs.
Yeah.
People like varying levels of that contact, and the fist bumps and stuff like that are important to me in developing relationships, and I miss that. So, and it was part in due to being so busy trying to help the team overall coordinate and adapt to all of the situations that we were experiencing with the new channel that we were introducing, and the training, and the impact of the customers that we were trying to mitigate, that I lost track of that. I hadn't had a focus group, and unfortunately at the end of the year we lost one of our teammates in our Chandler site to COVID, and then unfortunately we lost another person due to cancer in last month in our Omaha site. And it dawned on me, you haven't had a focus group in over a year. And that's my mistake. I think I was just tired, but focused to things that were kind of landing on my plate as usual or as unusual. And once I then got back into coordinating these things, I said, well, I'm going to have one a week. And what it's done is rekindled that connection to people. I
Yeah.
keep a chat room open for each of the meetings that we have, and any feedback that they're giving me or questions that they have that ask me during that actual physical virtual session, I would then funnel the answer back to them through that particular chat window. So gotten back to that as usual, but it took a painful look in the mirror and look back to say, you really should have kept these things going, even though you're working 14 hours a day. You probably should have worked 15. So lesson learned.
Yeah, I think what and what I've taken away from just what I've seen you all do and in my conversations with you is that the presence of leadership is incredibly important at this time. The fact that leaders, participate in these cook-offs, and obviously, I'm sure you'd love to see more teammates participate, but a third is pretty darn good from what I gather. But the notion, at least, that, or the intent or signal that you're sending by having leaders participate and being more present than not, certainly from what I can tell, goes a long way.
Well, it
Um,
does, but let me, before you ask me that question, there
yeah,
are other activities, like there's a Dungeons and Dragon group that probably has another 10% of that
yeah,
number that participate each week. And it's just, we try to create these engagement activities that are interesting to pockets of people, not expecting that everybody's going to participate, because as people like different things, and they like to choose, and we're giving them enough choice that our engagement scores through all of last year for my group was in the 95 range, 93 to 95% overall engaged range.
so I know a lot of organizations run their happy hours, but this is also where I start to get excited about what you're doing, because I've now tracked a Dungeons and Dragons group, a cook-off, and some wellness activities. So fair statement to say you guys are getting creative. And if I remember correctly, I might be mixing this up, but I remember talking to someone in your Dundalk office who was saying something about having maybe a band perform at one of the happy, like some local
Oh my
entertainment
gosh.
that maybe would have come live is now doing it over a Zoom.
Well, actually, yes, there was actually a number of those activities that happened out of our EMEA offices in Dundalk and Dublin. But even bigger, this past year, our annual uh, holiday celebrations were replaced by virtual programs that took place around the globe, and it was an unbelievable activity. There were bands, there were speakers, there were, excuse me, prizes. unbelievable amount of activity. There was even art lessons
Mm,
and like an exercise class that you could sign up for, during any one given time frame. Anybody in the company, including people in front office jobs that were customer facing, you could sign up and say, okay, I want to go to the kickoff. And then as part of the kickoff, they would announce 3 or 4 different 20-minute activities. Hey, go over here to learn about this, go do that. And it was a tremendous success and smash. In fact, it was over a number of days that this was done, and I can remember thinking, boy, this was really fun. I only spent an hour doing it. I probably could have done, a lot more of those activities if I had blocked time better.
yeah, I don't know about your team, but I feel like um, for us here, a lot of times it's just getting folks to that first event. And they're sort of, I don't know if I want to do this, but you come to that first event and you're just reminded at how nice it is to see a group of people again, and how nice it is to see people you haven't seen in some time, and again have that opportunity to catch up in a non-work setting.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Uh, God, I'm sorry.
well, I think it's one of the things that we as a company try to do is to try to make sure that we are communicating consistently and offering choice to people in terms of how they engage with the with the corporation and its activities, and that not only comes from the PayPal, you know, umbrella, but in that umbrella, there's all kinds of other things that we have people options to participate in that help to explore equity in the workplace. There are
Yeah.
lots of groups together that help to, that if people want to get involved in some activities that help to advance a cause of their, near and dear to their heart, then there's lots of opportunities to do so within our structure.
And I love the idea of I don't know if the term is catering to the different audiences, but again, you've got a large workforce. There are people who are interested in one thing but not the other, and so you do have a group for Dungeons and Dragons, but then you've got a wellness group, and so you've got those options to participate in whatever fits you. Um, I want to switch gears really quickly. At these are all the sort of, I don't know, feel good, engaging type activities, but we unfortunately do have to work. So if we turn our attention back to the work piece really quickly, or the work front really quickly, one of the things that I know organizations have been confronted with is, hey, look, we've shifted most, if not everyone, to work from home. In the past, we were on the floor, and if there was an issue, I could turn to my friend and ask them a question, or I could look over my shoulder and call my supervisor over, right, or my team lead over. Obviously, in a work from home environment, that doesn't exist. And what we have seen is that coaching will often kind of slip to the side a bit as well in this environment. And I wonder if you can comment on how coaching does or doesn't impact engagement in this environment.
Well, it's certainly a fabric of what we promote within our leaders' scope of work all the time. Having charge of the site coaches, I'm particularly proud of a couple of individuals who, as we went into transitioning to the work from home as well as the async work, there was a initiative very quickly to assess how we were going to set up virtual coaching and whether or not we could get approval from our infosec people to make sure that as we set that virtual coaching scenario up through teams, that as we were watching and then providing feedback to teammates live time, that we wouldn't impact the customer experience. There would be no sharing of critical information from a privacy standpoint. How do we work around that and get approval? It was quite a good amount of teamwork, but it's also not very easy to
Mm.
get infosec folks, rightly so, to sign off on these activities. But what we were able to do is once we got that sign off, we created guides to share with leaders to help them understand what we wanted them to do, how they were technically supposed to set their sessions up with people. And while we did find that the coaching took more of a let me help you get the technology working straight. Once you got that going, then you had your situations where you have certain pockets of people that needed extra help to reset or to do something different with their technology setups at home, including internet issues and provider issues. Believe it or not, some people don't have internet.
Yep.
So we had to figure out a way to obviously fund internet for those people that didn't have it. So the company did the right thing and has paid for internet for people. So we set all that type of stuff up, and then what we've been able to do fairly successfully. I'm not going to say that we are altogether successful in hitting the standard that we want in terms of the number of coaching sessions that we want each team leader to have with their teammates each month. We're getting closer and closer as we go down the as we mature into this space. So lots of change in that space, but we've adapted, I think, pretty well. And our scores, like I mentioned earlier, in the async channel were poor to begin with because people didn't understand. Our people didn't really understand the dynamics behind a async conversation, nor did customers. But after a little bit of time, because we tracked it, we dealt with it through that Let's Ace It program, those scores bounced up back very, very nicely, and our productivity went up because the efficiency also went down with handle times and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Building a little bit on that, I mean, one of the questions that has popped up over the last few months, right, as we've shifted to work from home and we think about how we're going to come back, and you've probably read what I've read, and you think about, these things as well, right? Hybrid approach, or have people in the office, we let them work from home, and so on. What was mentioned to me a few months ago was a concern around engagement, specifically because a forecast around attrition or a talent war, right? So now that everyone is working from home, it's easier for organizations to come and kind of pluck you out because, hey, if you worked in Omaha previously, you worked at PayPal or maybe one other organization, or if you worked in Chandler, right, you had a few different options. But now the world is kind of a reps or teammates oyster, if you will. I'd be curious to get your perspective on, what concerns do you have about the talent war that maybe there's one brewing, maybe there's not. And does engagement kind of sit in the back of your head as a result of that?
Well, I mean, you're always going to have spots around the globe that you want to resist getting into a talent war because that usually translates into higher cost.
Yeah.
And in the end, when our strategy is essentially let's pay attention so much to our teammates, provide them with the tools, with the compensation packages, with the coaching and support and development and the opportunities. Each person that comes to work for PayPal actually becomes a stockholder. So that was something that was added last year to the fold of benefits, and that helps to attract people, but it also obviously helps to retain. Our attrition numbers have gone down overall. I won't quote them, but attrition has come down very nicely, and it's staying down. So we don't necessarily worry too much about people leaving. We keep track of it to make sure that there's something that doesn't kind of spur up. As far as getting into wars with people, like I said, it's mostly compensation wars that you would get into, and sometimes you just can't convince people to stick around and say, well, hey, we're a great place. That might not be worth it to somebody who needs to who can't resist an opportunity to make $10,000 or $15,000 more. We pay very, very competitively with each of our markets, so not too necessarily worried about that in that space.
I opened up with a question around 12 months in, what's different today from a year ago? And so I want to close with a similar high level kind of question, which is, if you could do one thing differently, right? Kind of lessons learned-ish question. So as you think about engaging a dispersed workforce, and especially over the last year or so, as you move forward, what's one thing you would do differently? What's one thing you think you'll be doing differently moving forward, given what you've learned over the last 12 months or so when it comes to engaging your team?
Well, for me personally, like the thing that I I messed up on was frankly just not. I was communicating with the people that I needed to communicate with and checking in with my directs and even their directs as well. But I missed plenty of opportunities to connect um, with the people that are in the trenches and
Yeah.
doing work. And I feel bad about that. And there's always opportunity to kind of uh, go back and you know do a do-over and fix that. And I have scheduled at least for the next couple of months weekly focus groups with 5 or 6 people across each of my disciplines altogether. And those have borne fruit in terms of reconnecting with people and letting people know that you're there to help them. There have been people reaching out to me as a result of that individually. Hey, can you help me uh, from a development standpoint? Certainly. Can you look at my resume? I'm interested in a job in another part of the company. Sure, do that. Or answering a specific question about a policy and procedure that they would like to see changed to make their job easier. I've been running those down. It's stuff that I remember loving, but because of that singular focus to let's let's get it all done, you know, let's adapt to all this change. I lost track of it, and I won't do it again because in the end, I get personally fueled by that service to that servant based leadership model
Yeah.
that is in my heart that I really want to, and I am getting back to, and it feels good to me to be able to do that. And I think people are feeling better about it. In fact, I just got a ping this morning from one of the teammates who's organizing a some kind of a contest that they asked me to judge for next month, and they wanted me to be guest judge, and I'm like, yes, sign me up.
Tell me
And
it's a singing competition or something.
oh, I'm not sure what it is. I would just pretty much say yes to anything to interact with people at this point. But it just shows you that once you put the effort out there, you get it back, and people then see you as a leader that's willing to help them have some fun. We're
Yeah.
actually going to end up, because we're going to lose the wellness activity with the number of steps and the number of ounces of water. We're getting our clocks clean, so to speak. We're going to lose that one at the end of the month, and all leaders have to participate in a virtual TikTok dance as our punishment and celebration of leaders watching us. So it's going to be quite
Mark it
interesting.
down a month from now. Check out TikTok
Yeah, yeah.
for some fun
So
dancing.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Quick follow-up to that, Dave. I would make an assumption, or I would assume that as you are having these conversations, obviously you're sending the signal or demonstrating that you are open to conversations, you're there for people. I suspect you're also then hearing some feedback, informal or formal, from these individuals as well, whether they're venting or frustrated or happy with some of the activities you're running. But again, I'm assuming here.
No, no. They actually, it's all been very positive. The only thing that I got through that line of questioning in these focus groups was the fact that there was a community events calendar that had transitioned to a link based, uh, click on the link, show all the activities, from the former, which was just all activities with pictures and stuff listed on an email, that the link didn't work, and that they had disengaged a little bit in some of the community activities because the link never worked. And I'm like, well, why didn't you report that? No, we just didn't. So, we're getting that fixed. And that's just an example of how just simply making a connection with people in that setting, you time it nicely with something like that. And then you have to follow up on these things. You can't just make a note and say, oh, I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah.
If you don't follow up on people, then your credibility and trust is blown. I will say one more thing about those meetings, though. I asked the simple question: would you go back into the office, and if so, what would be your kinds of thoughts around it? And there was a lot of people that had mixed reactions. Some said I would go back in a second. I'd go back full time. Some said I'd go back in a hybrid 2-3 day model.
Sure.
Some said I wouldn't go back at all because I have autoimmune issues, or I like the fact that I have a lot less money spent traveling and commuting and eating out all the time. So there's a you know, different reactions. But one of the things that I think pops out as well is that depending on the location that people are at and the state and local ability to, is the vaccine rate high,
Mm.
administrate rate high, is the effectiveness of the vaccine enough? Do I want to go back in? Do I have to wear a mask? All those questions are being asked at this point, just as a hypothetical question that I threw out there just to get a kind of a flavor for where people's minds are at. And we'll see, as we pursue that, the new norm at some point down the line.
And should I wanted to, you mentioned something a second ago, and I just want to pick up on it, and then I promise this will be the final question. And so we can get you back to an art lesson or some, cook-offs or something along those lines. You mentioned you just got an email about judging a contest. I think in speaking with other organizations, there's sometimes this, I'll call it misconception around, hey, look, we've got a group and this group will come up with the events. But what that email that you received screams to me is, hey, look, if someone comes up with a good idea, let's see if we can make that happen. And we shouldn't shy away from it, and people shouldn't shy away from reaching out to leaders to participate as well. That's what I'm hearing. But again, I don't want to put words in your mouth either.
No, in fact, I don't really think of these ideas because we have one of the team leaders that works out of our Chandler office is in charge of the employee engagement activities for my particular group. And she recruits teammates to spend part of their non-prod time participating in the brainstorming of these activities and then the organization of these activities. So we're a bottoms up organization when it comes to this stuff. And, really what I've learned over the years in that space is that if I come out and say, well, let's participate in X, X, and X, that may be my choice, but there's a gap in terms of what I might want to see and participate in versus somebody who's 30 years younger than me.
Yeah.
And I'm not playing Dungeons and Dragons. I'm watching my adult kids now playing stuff like that. I have no interest in playing that game, but it just wouldn't dawn on me to organize something like that simply because I have no interest in it. So bottoms up really makes it work, and I don't think that's a secret to many people listening today.
No, but I mean, it's one thing to talk it. It's one thing, it's one thing to talk about it. It's one thing to walk, right? You can talk the talk, but you got to walk the walk as well. Yeah. So Dave might not be in your Dungeons and Dragons group, but he will be on TikTok in another month or so.
Yeah, well, I definitely will be, and we can certainly invite you to the Dungeons and Dragons if
I will be front row for that. Dave, thank you so much for your time, spending a few minutes with us. This has been great. We'll have more of these for folks who are listening in the coming weeks, but want to again say thank you to Dave for joining us here. Dave, have a great rest of your day and appreciate your time.
Scott, it's been a pleasure. I thank you very much. And I'm not going to go to an employee engagement activity. I'm actually going to be asking a couple questions about how we've rolled out our effortless experience training to one of our trainers next. So yeah, that's always a good topic for me to jump into.
Always appreciate the plug, Dave. It's good to see you, sir. Take care. We'll talk soon.